welcome to Mission West Virginia, brought to you by the West Virginia Library Television Network. I'm your host, Rachel Kinder, Director of the Frameworks Program at Mission West Virginia. Today, my show guest is Amy Connelly, and she is here with the Putnam Wellness Coalition, and she is here to talk to us about vaping. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I'm really interested to hear what you have to educate me on today, something I don't know a whole lot about. But first, can you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your degree, and how you got started in your career.
Sure. I'm Amy Connelly, and I was the youth who used cigarettes when I was probably about age 12. And I smoked for about 13 years.
Wow.
Along the way, I also picked up alcohol by age 13 or 14. And like all people I know who have gone through some things, I decided to go and get a career helping others because I wanted to help people out once I found a way out of that. So
that is a common journey, I've noticed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what is your degree in?
So I have a master's degree in community counseling.
Okay.
So I was actually an addictions counselor I worked in the addictions field for 15 years. And when I became a mom, I needed kind of a change in career. After 15 years, I was ready to move on to something new.
Yeah.
And I met Bill Odell, who was one of the founders of the Putnam Wellness Coalition, and he kind of got me into prevention. He was an amazing man and mentor, and
a lot of people speak very kindly of him. Yes.
Yes.
I've heard wonderful things about him over the years.
Yeah, and I've been a volunteer or an employee since then. That was about 2015.
Okay. And you're here today to talk to us about vaping.
Yes.
That was my coworker works with you on the Putnam Wellness Coalition, and she suggested that. So tell us what a vape is.
So to understand what's going on with vaping, we have to kind of talk about tobacco first. We have to talk about cigarettes.
Okay.
So in the mid-century, cigarettes became a very big, hip thing. You know, you saw in the movies, everybody had the long-stemmed cigarettes. And it was just a part of culture for a long time, until probably about the 70s, when we started to see long-term studies that showed the negative effects of tobacco use. And then initiatives were launched to kind of let the public know how harmful cigarette smoking could be.
Right.
And since that time, there's been a lot of laws passed. It's no longer okay to smoke a cigarette, say, in your cubicle at work, or in most restaurants. You can't smoke anymore. I think the effects of smoking are very well understood by our culture, and the rates of smoking went way down. So around probably about 2015, plus or minus, vapes started to really hit the market. So the first vapes that really hit the market were these kind of little devices. And they had little nicotine pods, and a lot of them had the nicotine built in.
Okay.
And the idea was that vaping was going to replace smoking and help people quit smoking.
I remember that, yeah.
Yes. So that's how they were marketed starting out. So what's happened is that we have progressed over time. So now we have the regulated vapes, which are pretty much similar to these. But then we have a whole assortment of unregulated vapes that are coming from overseas, that are coming from a lot of different places that have hit the market, the vape shops, the internet, those kinds of things. So we're looking at something totally different than we were even in 2015 when these came out.
Okay, and are those legal to sell?
That is a really complex question.
I had a feeling.
Basically, the simple answer that I found out this year from talking to lawmakers and law enforcement is that there are conflicting laws. There are laws protecting hemp-derived products, which vapes no longer have just nicotine. We now have other things showing up, which are becoming a problem, such as THC products.
Okay.
So we have laws that protect hemp. We have chemists who are using those laws to create Frankenstein THC products, basically, into vapes. And so in addition to that, we have taxes being collected on some THC hemp-derived products. Yet we also have laws that say that these products are illegal to sell in our state. So it's very confusing for those who are trying to enforce the laws. It's very confusing for the courts. So that's why we're kind of where we're at. Now, if you look back at what I told you about tobacco, we're in the early stages, okay? If we go back to the mid-century when everybody was smoking and nobody really knew the long-term effects, that's where we're now at with vaping.
So if I go to a gas station, not a vape shop, just a regular gas station, purchase a very legally clear vape, what's in that?
So if you are over the age of 21,
Okay.
that could have nicotine in it. It could be advertised as a THC product if you chose to do that instead of the nicotine.
Okay.
The problem with that is, again, the THC products are unregulated, meaning the FDA is not doing samples on them, testing, proving what is actually in those vapes. So that's the really frightening part. Now, the good thing is that our legislature passed a bill this year that just went into effect in June, actually, that you now have to be 21 in the state of West Virginia instead of 18 to purchase a vape device or vape products. So that was a big deal to us. We're very, very excited about that.
Okay, so matching cigarette laws, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things you had mentioned before the show was the marketing of vapes. Can you talk about how those are marketed? Because it sounds like they're not just being marketed to 21 and older.
Oh, absolutely not. So they did studies back with the cigarette advertising, and they found that some of those companies were using advertising that appealed to youth. Think back to the Camel.
That crossed my mind. But
Joe
yeah.
Cool, the Camel, and a variety of other things. Menthol cigarettes were highly marketed to the African American population. So, they do use targeted ads. So what we have happening with vapes is when they came out shortly thereafter, they started coming out in fruity flavors. So they started coming out in like berry and, everybody's favorite's blue raspberry and, green
It's
apple.
not a very mature flavor.
No.
That's a kid's candy flavor.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So they started passing some legislation on national level to limit the amount of flavoring. But that's in the regulated products again. So youth can still get on the internet and still go in vape shops and they can purchase unregulated. So I brought an example with me of a vape that can now be purchased, and I believe this one was purchased online. I don't know if the camera will pick this up or not. This is a video game. This is
Yeah.
a strawberry flavored vape,
Okay.
and it's a video game, and it has games similar to Pac-Man.
So if you can't see, it looks just like a game I would play on an older phone.
Atari.
Yep.
Not a lot of people remember that, but yes. So basically, if you push this button 3 times, you get games. If you push it 5 times, you get vape.
Okay.
So it has a child-proof lock on it.
Wow.
But, the idea that they are marketing a strawberry-flavored video game which holds thousands of hits of nicotine. So that's another problem with the vapes, is that if you look back at cigarettes, when people were smoking, which some still do, but it's very low, you would take a smoke break after
Right.
they passed laws that you couldn't smoke inside. Say a youth is using this at school. They're going to sneak in the bathroom or they're going to sneak out back. They're only going to get to smoke a couple times a day. Well, when you look at something as small as this vape, this can be carried in a pocket.
Right.
Commonly, they will hide this maybe in a hoodie pocket, and they'll pull their hoodie up over their face and just take a quick hit.
Wow.
So they can use it in class, They can use it in the bathrooms. They can use it down the hall from mom and dad. Mom and dad are not going to smell anything these days.
Right.
They may smell a slight odor that smells like fruity or minty, just depending on what product, but they're getting better and better at making these undetectable. So that's one thing that we definitely need parents to know, is to be looking for this.
Now, I heard somewhere that some of the schools do have vape detectors.
Yes.
Okay, do those work?
Yes.
That's good.
So Putnam County Schools does have the vape detectors. They have those in the bathrooms, and those are able to detect vapes.
Okay.
So that's the good news.
That is a good start, but like you're
Yes.
saying, they're not all going to the bathrooms to use these.
Right,
Okay.
right. And they know where the vape detectors are. It's obvious. The really cool thing is that they have deterrents in the detectors to where if somebody tries to take it off the wall or vandalize it in some way, it immediately alerts a specific person.
Okay.
So that's good as well. But again, they've learned kind of how to mask the smoke.
Right.
They've learned ways to try to filter it so it's not as easy to detect.
Now, right before the show started, I was explaining that my kids are 8 and 9, and you were saying that this is probably the time to start talking to them about vapes.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
So what we've seen, at least in Putnam County, is that there are children and now I don't want to in any way indicate this as a school problem,
Right.
based problem. This is
kids.
a home problem
kids.
as well.
Okay.
But when we have talked to middle school aged youth, sixth graders, there are already sixth graders vaping.
And that's 11, 12?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. A lot of them, when we asked them, when did you start using, they said age 10.
Wow.
So age 10 is obviously elementary school age. Now that's just a few that are doing that at sixth grade when we last, assessed them, which was 2023.
Okay.
But by eighth grade, that rate goes way up. So if we wait until eighth grade to start the conversation, or we wait until even middle school to start the conversation, we may be waiting too late for some of them.
I mean, it sounds like you have the data that says we really are. So I'm going to jump around a little bit on the questions, but so how do youth access vapes when they're 10, 11?
So we did a survey, again, in 2023, and we asked youth, how are they obtaining them? What we found out is they are getting them from friends, obviously. They can get them from their neighbor, they can get them on the bus, they can, they can get them, exchange them anywhere because they're so easy to hide. So part of the law going from 18 to 21, we're hoping will be really helpful because previously a lot of seniors in high school were 18, right?
Right.
So they could go purchase these and give them to younger youth. So we're hoping that by that age, raising to 21, that will prevent as many from getting in the hands of youth. They're purchasing them on the internet. And again, our wonderful legislators this year passed some legislation to try to limit youth from getting them on the internet. But when there's all this black market, there are so many different ways to get things. It's hard to block all access, but with every bit of access that we can block, the better off we are. It will lower the rates.
That
That's
makes
been
sense.
shown.
Right. So how much of a problem is this in our state? How do we compare to the rest of the country?
Well, the news is not good on that. West Virginia has the highest rates of youth vaping in the country, according to the Division on Tobacco Prevention, and that is 35.7%.
That seems high.
And that kind of echoes, again, what we saw with cigarette smoking. There is kind of a culture of that in West Virginia. So, yeah, it's very high.
We were a tobacco growing state. It makes
Right.
sense that it is part of our culture. So what are the effects of people vaping, kids and adults?
So going back to dosages in these things, if you look at somebody smoking a cigarette versus somebody hitting a vape, somebody can hit a vape all day long. They can hit a vape at the desk at work. They can hit a vape if they're at a music concert throughout the concert. They can a lot of people will sit in a restaurant these days and hit a vape.
Right.
So that's something to be aware of, is that it's massive amounts of nicotine, if it's nicotine that they're using in their vape, that is getting into their system. Nicotine.
So more nicotine, sorry to interrupt, but more nicotine than if you were a smoker?
Right, because smoking slows down the delivery of nicotine. This is highly, highly concentrated nicotine.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you're looking at, yes, a much higher rate of nicotine that people are getting from these. Nicotine is a highly addictive drug, which we know from past cigarette use.
Right.
People become addicted very quickly. It's a very intense craving, one of the most intense cravings that people get.
I mean, is it true that it's comparable to opiate heroin addiction? Because I've heard that stated.
So it's kind of hard to compare. It's like comparing apples and bananas.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to say. The level of withdrawal, the withdrawal symptoms are going to be very different.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The cravings are very strong, though. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Are we going to put somebody in a detox and detox them medically from nicotine? No.
Okay.
In other words, it's not as physically dangerous as alcohol, benzos, opiates, that kind of thing.
That makes sense. But still.
But very addictive,
yeah.
very hard to quit, yes.
Okay. And what are some of the physical effects of vaping that are detrimental?
So we only know right now the short-term effects. We don't know the long-term effects right now.
Because we're looking at about a decade of use, and that's it, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And the way the vapes operate, the different kinds of vapes that are available, that's even changed over the decade. So it's going to take a while, just with how with the cigarettes, it was the middle of the century, everybody was smoking them. It was the 70s and 80s when we really found out the effects. So that's a big giant question mark.
Yeah.
Now in the short term, you're looking at any effects that you would get from nicotine, just like with cigarettes, like, blood pressure and heart rate will go up. You might get some nervousness, some dizziness. When people first use it, what a lot of youth are going for is kind of a buzzy, head swimming kind of feeling.
Yeah.
That tends to go away very shortly once people become addicted. So then it becomes, they're trying to not have the intense cravings, irritability, insomnia, those kinds of things that come with the nicotine use.
Okay, that makes sense. So
now, if we're talking about THC...
Okay, let's talk about THC.
I don't know if you're ready to go there.
No, I'm ready. Let's educate us on that, because so it's not just nicotine in these.
No,
okay.
No. And what we're hearing from students and what we're hearing from youth and from people who work with youth is that over the past year or so, they have seen a drastic switch from the nicotine vapes to THC vapes.
Okay.
So with the THC vapes, a lot of people will compare that to the leaf marijuana from back in the Woodstock days, right?
I hear it. That's not what we're getting
just
anymore.
Marijuana.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You're looking at something that is 10, even 20 times stronger than a joint when you're looking at a THC cartridge. So it's very potent, very powerful THC. And when somebody uses that, what you're going to see if they've used a high concentration of it is you're going to see symptoms as if they have schizophrenia. They're going to be paranoid, they might be delusional, they might have hallucinations, they're going to be acting out of their head. It also causes nonstop vomiting, which is not fun to talk about, but these are the things that youth need to know can happen if they take in too much of this THC. And we have had youth report that they've seen their friends go through this.
And where would a youth get a THC vape? Now, I don't want to give people instructions, but, but educate me on how those are sold.
Okay. So again, there are conflicting laws about whether or not THC is legal. We're all familiar probably by now with the CBD oils, right? They are hemp derived. They are not Delta-9 THC, so they can technically be sold.
Okay.
So what is happening is the people who are selling these THC vapes, is they're taking a little bit of this Delta-9 to keep it below the legal limit.
Okay.
They're taking a little bit of Delta-8, which is it's a very similar compound, has similar effects. They're taking these different types of Delta and they're mixing them together and they're concentrating them and then selling them.
Okay.
So technically now, under the age of 21, if it is vape related, you cannot buy it unless you are over 21. So that's the good news. The good news is that youth cannot go in and buy these vapes. However, that being said, not all of the vape store owners really care about that. Not all of them follow the laws. So that becomes a problem.
And how strong are the laws? Are there big consequences if you get caught selling to an underage child?
So another good news,
Okay.
thanks to our legislature, is that the penalties for selling to youth have gone up.
Okay.
So they are higher than they used to be. I believe it's $250 for a first offense, and that goes to the business owner. And then second offense becomes $500 to $750, and so on and so forth. So the penalties get stiffer with each additional sale to a minor. That being said, if you look at some of these vape shops, if you were to look at how much money they are generating, it's a drop in the bucket.
How much can a vape cost?
So this one I've been told is $25.
Okay.
And it has, I don't want to quote wrong, I can't remember for sure. It was either 22,000, I think it was 22,000 hits.
That's a lot.
It was a lot of
Okay.
hits. Yeah, it was in the thousands, I promise you that.
Okay.
But I can't remember the exact amount that was in here. And it lasted, I've been told, a couple of weeks for the person, the adult who was using it.
Okay.
So this was donated to us by a vape user. So.
Okay. I appreciate your visuals. So even though it's $25, you're still going to need a refill or a new one in a couple
Yes.
weeks? Okay. So they're making plenty of money selling these and they can pay those fines is kind of what I hear you saying.
Exactly. So, these fines are a lot more than they were prior to this year, but we could do a lot better too.
So what do I do if I suspect that a vape shop is selling to underage? Is there a way I can report that?
Yes, absolutely. There is a hotline that you can call, and that is the FDA tobacco compliance number, and that's 1-800-287-1373. You can also submit a complaint online.
Okay. And this is national? If this
Yes.
is the okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the FDA does their own checks. You can also contact your local law enforcement agency and let them know, make them aware of it, because there are things that they can do also on a county level or a local level, just depending on what county or what city it's in.
And do they still do the operations where they send in minors to see
Yes.
if that still happens?
Yes, they
Okay.
do. They do. SINAR and the DHHR do those tobacco compliance on behalf of the FDA regulations. Also, local law enforcement can also do those. They can go in and they can do checks. So one is FDA or national compliance, and the other one would be state or local or county.
Okay. Well, that's good information to have. So what can we do if we recognize that this is a concern for our community? Like what ways is this being addressed?
I would say the number one thing would be for everyone in the community to work together. Everyone. We need youth, because youth who are concerned about this, they come to us and they tell us these things. They are very concerned. They're seeing what's happening with their peers. We've had one that said, we can't get enough players for the basketball team because too many kids are vaping in the school.
Wow.
So, but youth aren't going to listen to us. If we go on TikTok and we say, don't vape, they're just going to roll their eyes, right?
Right.
But if their peers are spreading that messaging, they'll listen to their peers. So really the youth are the experts on what the youth are doing
That makes
and how to
sense.
reach the youth.
Yeah.
We need parents. Some of these youth are saying that they're getting these vapes from their parents. Their parents know they have them. So we need parents to understand that this is not just flavored water. That's a big myth about vaping. And a lot of youth will tell their parents that it's just flavored water. There's no drug in here. So we need parents to know that, yes, there is a drug in there. We also need parents to know that if they are vaping and their youth are seeing it, their youth are more likely to vape. We need law enforcement, obviously, to enforce the laws about underage vaping and underage sales. But the law enforcement is only as good as the court is, because the law enforcement officer can write the ticket, but then the court has to make decisions and enforce penalties. So we need law enforcement, we need courts, we need everybody. We need educators at the table, because they have a front line access to these youth.
Right.
They know what's going on. They hear things, they see things. You know, they can let us know when trends are changing. It's going to take all of us, really. That's what I truly believe, is when everybody who is concerned about this gets together, that's when we're going to be able to overcome it.
And it sounds like that's a big chunk of what you do daily is try to counteract vaping.
Yes.
So you had mentioned SAD clubs. So I think back in my day that was Students Against Drunk Driving. That's not what that stands for anymore,
No,
right?
No, that's just one little piece of it. It's still there, but that would be Students Against Destructive Decisions. So that is a youth-led organization. So the youth are able to kind of say what their concerns are. So if the youth concerns are vaping of marijuana, then we just equip them, we give them the skills and the tools, and we support what their vision is for spreading the messaging or for doing something about it.
And do you see a lot of the SAD clubs identifying vaping as a concern for them?
Yes.
Yeah.
They identify vaping, bullying gets brought up, domestic violence gets brought up a lot, social media concerns, those kinds of things. So what we try to do is we try to ask the youth, you know, how they would like to combat it, and then just support their vision.
Well, it makes a lot of sense that you're letting youth identify the issues, because they have a much clearer picture than we do, being
Right.
removed from their ages. So we just have another minute left. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience that you think is really important for them to come away understanding?
So we touched on SAD clubs. I want to take a moment to also touch on RAISE clubs.
Okay.
There are RAISE clubs in West Virginia, and those are similar to SAD clubs, but those focus specifically on tobacco and vaping prevention. So those are in schools as well. So I just wanted to make sure that doesn't get overlooked.
No, I didn't know what that was. Does that stand for something?
I'm not the person to ask that.
Okay.
I should know that, and I do not know.
Okay.
But I know that they try to raise awareness.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes,
There's the hook. Okay.
My final takeaway would be swift interventions when youth are caught vaping, the community working together, and also providing cessation. So if people need help, they can also call the West Virginia Tobacco Quit line.
Okay. All right, great note to end on. I learned a lot today. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been another episode of Mission West Virginia, and we hope that you will join us next month.